Hello everyone, I am continuing the Wheel of Time spoiler talks with the Dragon Reborn. So if you haven't read the Dragon Reborn, get out. I will not be spoiling things past the Dragon Reborn. I may have a tiny bit at the end that I will clearly label, because there's one specific bit of foreshadowing I want to talk about, but that's going to be at the very end. Anyways, this sparks joy. So, we got the Dragon Reborn, which is very different from the first two novels, although it kind of keeps some of the similarities. But the obvious difference is how few point of views Rand gets. But first, let's talk Prologue. This is really the last real prologue. Every prologue after this is like just the first 100. It's like a screenshot of the entire world. But the first three prologues are actually prologues. And this one, we follow primarily Perrin Rand. And I like Perrin Rand, which is a little bit weird, because he kind of sucks. But what I like about Perrin Rand is that his conclusions, given the premises he believes, tend to be completely logical and sensible, but he just has some premises that he believes that he can't get rid of that cause him to come to wildly inaccurate conclusions. And it was really interesting on reread, because you see that a lot of the things that he believes that lead to him coming to completely wildly wrong conclusions are kind of planted in his head by Ordith, who is of course Perrin Rand. So kind of a lot of the reasons he's coming into these conclusions is being planted and spread by Perrin Rand, and you I imagine on reread I'm going to see the influence that Perrin Rand has on others more, but this was kind of the first example for this. And then the man who called himself Boars, which is obviously from the book 2 POV, comes in to talk to Perrin Rand, and Perrin Rand basically tells him, don't kill Rand, because he wants Rand to become this big threat, and then he can unite everyone in order to deal with Rand, which is a pretty interesting plan. And he threatens the guy, Karim? I forget how to say his name. He threatens the man who calls himself Boars when he's in Dark Friend meetings, to not kill Rand, but then the man who calls himself Boars leaves, and a Myrddraal shows up and gives him a much more effective threat. When it comes to threatening people to do what you want, the Perrin Rand is kind of an amateur compared to a Myrddraal, and the Myrddraal is like, yeah, if you don't kill Rand, we will flay one of your family members every month you last. And I'd forgotten that this character was in the prologue of the Dragon Reborn on first read, but I noted on this read, I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure he comes up again. I wonder if he's, mentally unstable or, have degraded. And I can tell you, as someone who's read Further 4, he is. So now I'm kind of looking forward to following the arc of the man who calls himself Boars. I didn't even know he had an arc on first read. This is the type of thing that's really cool on rereads. Anyways, and next, so that is the prologue. Book 1, best prologue of the 3, then book 3, then book 2. Pretty solidly. Book 2 of 3 prologue was pretty fire. Way better than I remembered it being. Good stuff. And we move on to Perrin and Rand and that whole crew who are sitting around because they just don't have the resources to actively go to war, and Rand wants to help all his people who came up for the dragon, and Moiraine's like, yeah, that's dumb. And Rand is annoyed because Moiraine is right. We got Min there, who's like, that girl's gonna die. She does. And Perrin's being a wolfy boy. And I love Perrin's conversations with Rand here. Obviously some Trollocs show up. And after, when Rand is like, my contribution to the battle was, trying not to kill everyone here. That was pretty yikes. We also had Perrin really embracing the wolfiness of this fight, and Min's going to the tower. But Rand is like, I'ma go get me a glowing sword to see if I'm the Dragon Reborn. And so they're off, and they go to and Perrin gets some viewing, and the scene in, the first village, I think, is really good. And it's where it's the village with Gaul, where Perrin frees Gaul. Fael looks at him. Fael. He kills some more White Cloaks, but they don't know it was him this time, so they actually should be more upset with him than they actually are. That's a bit of an oof. And that's kind of it for Perrin. And we spend quite a lot of time in the White Tower after this, because the Wheel of Time, the way it's written, the way you get point of views, they are basically almost always strictly chronological until Brandon Sanderson takes over. So that's one of the reasons you get the big streams of point of views, because people will be traveling somewhere for a while, and when you're in another point of view for a long stretch, it's because if one group of people was doing something while the other was traveling, it's just all that point of view. I don't see many authors go this strictly chronologically very often. Kind of an interesting approach. I think it's not my preference. I feel like sometimes it sacrifices telling the narrative in order to keep a strict chronological order. That being said, it's kind of impressive that he did it. Although it's not my preference, I would kind of prefer the more A Song of Ice and Firestorm. Really most other multi-perspective fantasy series don't bother being this strict about it. I've never really seen a series be as strict about being chronological as The Wheel of Time, but it's very, very strictly chronological. Anyway, so we move on to the White Tower, and I remember on first read not really being super interested in Egwene's stuff with the White Tower here, but I really enjoyed it on reread this time. We had some really good stuff. We had her accepted test, which was fantastic. We get a lot with Varen, who I'm a big fan of, and Swan Sanche unleashes her against the Black Ajah, and you got a kind of funny scene that I'm going to talk more about later, where those of you who know why this is funny will know. Egwene is talking with Elaine, and they're talking about being courageous, and Elaine is the rulers of Andor have always been courageous. Once there was a battle, and the Queen of Andor, they were losing, and the Queen of Andor charged into the enemy forces unarmed and unarmored, and her army rallied in order to save her, and it won the battle. And for those of you who know why that's funny, you do. So yeah, there was quite a lot of foreshadowing and a bit of making me laugh because I know where things are going to go. But then I can't talk about that. Anyways, we get some stuff with the Gray Man shows up, which kind of freaks people out, and they are find. Okay, so else Grindwell. This isn't something that's going to get revealed later. This is just something that is kind of obvious on reread for the Dragon Reborn. When Else brings Swan's message to Egwene and Elaine, and they're confused why Swan Sanche trusted Else. Else is Lanfear there. Else is just Lanfear in disguise. And so that's why Egwene lost Else while chasing her and instead saw Lanfear, because Else was just Lanfear in disguise. And that's very suspicious. Anyways, so they find the stuff of the Black Ajah, and we're going to hunt the Black Ajah. I'm sure we'll be back in the tower shortly. Anyway, so meanwhile, we get the Lucky Boy, and we get Matt point of views, and I love Matt point of views. I remember the first time reading The Dragon Reborn, first 2 books, wasn't a big fan of Matt, and I'm and I was already getting these point of views I didn't quite like as much. They were fine, but I didn't like them as much, and then I'm a Matt point of view, I don't like Matt, and it took me 1 page to be I like Matt now. We get the Lucky Boy who beats the shit out of Gawain. Get wrecked, Gawain. Guys who's the best sword fighter of all time? And they all give the answer. And he's he lost 1 fight ever. And it was to a farmer with a stick. And Matt just wants out of there, but it is not happening. He's eating a lot of food, meanwhile insisting that he's fine. But then Nynaeve, Elaine, and Egwene are hey, we have a way for you to get out. All you have to do is deliver this letter to Caemlyn, and Matt promises he will, and Matt keeps his word, damn it. That's one thing I like about Nat. He seems like, in terms of if you just go based off his voice and his dialogue, you would think he's the least reliable person ever. But in terms of, like, actual actions, he's legitimately the most reliable person in the Wheel of Time. And, like, it isn't close. Everyone else, like, if they promise they'll do something, they might. Some of them probably will. Matt will. Matt will not go back on a promise. He promised he would deliver the letter. They tried to, like, trick him into doing it, and he was like, I'll do it if it gets me out of here. Like, you didn't have to do that. Anyways, so he's going to deliver it, and meanwhile, first on the way, he's going to gamble a bunch, and he's just going to win a shit ton of money. He's going to get attacked by footpads and not die, and then he's going to meet with Tom, Marilyn, and Tom's going to be like, there are no footpads, and he's like, oh no, those are dark friends. Oh no. And then he's going to go on a boat. He's going to get attacked by dark friends again. And he's like, I don't even know what the game is. And I really like this chapter where he kept rolling the dice for fun. And he's rolling all ones, 5 ones. And he's like, this is a win in some game. And the best score in some game and the worst score in others. And then he's like, I don't know what's going on. How can I win the game if I don't know what the game is? And then he gets to Camelin. Meanwhile, the Wonder Girls have headed out. They are going on their way to Tyr. But he gets to Camelin, he delivers the letter, and he's like, the person Morghese is banging kind of wants to kill Elaine. Person is extremely suspicious. He wagers, he's like, I will wager that I beat you, and I always win. So Matt is also going to Tyr. We got Rand going to Tyr. We got Perrin going to Tyr. Fael randomly joins Perrin's group, and one of my favorite sections for Fael in this book is at first Moiraine is not saying any sensitive information in front of Fael, and Fael's a hunter of the horn, but as soon as Perrin mentions that Rand is the Dragon Reborn and Fael knows that, Moiraine just doesn't care anymore, and Moiraine just starts doing things in front of Fael like, oh yeah, you know, they could actually be after Matt. He did blow the horn of Valyr after all. And I'm picturing, I want to see this for the TV show, like Fael's reaction when Moiraine is like, Matt blew the horn of Fael. Fael's just like, what? Like, what? What do you mean he blew the horn of Valyr? What are you talking about? So that's hilarious. Now, Fael, I don't mind late book Fael, but Fael in these first 2 books is that she's in, because she's in Shadow Rising as well, which I'm reading now. She kind of gets on my nerves. Now, for the second half, she gets better in the Shadow Rising, but for the Dragon Reborn and the first half Shadow Rising, she kind of gets on my nerves. Just leave me alone, Fael. Anyways, also, they're like, oh, yeah, Samael's ruling Ilion. We gotta get out of here, and everyone is in Tyr. Oh yeah, the Wonder Girls make it as well, and they meet some Aiel. Of course, they're like, we can handle her. They'll sell from the mainland, and then they get in trouble 672 times. But they run into Avianda, who's maybe, I wonder if she'll be a reoccurring character. Foreshadowing phase. That's the one, people on Alex's Discord were like, oh, Jake has a foreshadowing phase. Anyway, this isn't really foreshadowing, it's just Avianda is obviously a character that is going to get more screen time. They show up in Tyr, they meet a wisdom, and they get captured. That's what they do. They get captured a lot, okay? They get captured first and almost sold to a Myrddraal. But the people who drugged them weren't listening to the person who explained how to drug people, so they were fine. And the Aiel show up and rescue them, and then they kill the Myrddraal. Yay! So everyone gets to Tyr. Matt docks in Tyr right next to the house. Oh, this is actually, Nynaeve is like, yeah, we shouldn't stay in an inn because people know to look in an inn. And Matt, his luck won't help him find him because he's only searching inns. So when he picks inns randomly, he picks the ones that try and lead him that way, and he landed right next to the correct house, but he's only checking inns. But eventually he figures it out, but they've already been captured. Also, I forgot to mention at one point, Matt got explosives, and he keeps trying to, open the explosives. He did it as a kid as well, and he's like, it'll be fine, they probably won't explode, we'll toss it in the fire. Matt and explosives is truly, truly an iconic duo, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking explode the wall of the Stone of Tyr. And meanwhile, Rand is like, I'm coming for that sword. Perrin and Moiraine show up, and Moiraine is like, we got more Forsaken. Alright, time to balefire someone. There were also like Dark Hounds. I forgot their name, Dark Hounds. Anyways, which also got bale fired. And so we meet the most lackluster Forsaken of all time, Belal, who gets a good 2 lines of dialogue before being bale fired by Moiraine. Rand grabs Kalendor, fights a badass duel with a Shamael, kills him finally, thinks he killed the Dark One. Moiraine is like, yeah, that ain't the Dark One, folks. Matt explodes the wall of the Stone of Tyr, rescues the Wonder Girls, beats up some people with a stick, gets yelled at for rescuing the Wonder Girls. Bleh. Damn it, Wonder Girls, he rescued you. Just admit it, damn it. Also, Egwene explores the World of Dreams, and I'm not the hugest World of Dreams fan. I just find, like, the scenes, I don't enjoy them as much as some people do. Which is why some of the books that are very popular for some are slightly lower for me. Anyways, Dragon Reborn, first read versus second read. I think when I first read The Wheel of Time, like, my ratings, I didn't have it as well fleshed out as what number correlated to what level of enjoyment, and especially I just in general rated things higher than I would now. So a lot of these ratings are probably going to drop a little bit, but I actually enjoyed aspects I didn't enjoy as much on my first read. It's just a 9 now. I have a higher standard for than a high 9 when I was reading The Wheel of Time. It was kinda, I used to reread a lot, and I just discovered the BookTube community and Discord and finally had reliable recommendations for books. So I started reading a huge influx of new books instead of primarily rereads. And I just didn't have it fleshed out on what rating corresponded to what. So this did move down from a 9 to an 8.8. I think, even though I enjoyed it more, like I was slightly worried about the Dragon Reborn because I remembered some of the Egwene and White Tower stuff being not amazing. But I really do enjoy this book. Really liking Egwene and Nynaeve on this reread. I'm enjoying this. Actually, this had less like point of views from non-main characters than The Great Hunt did. The Great Hunt had Bael Doman and Bornald. This didn't really have that. All the point of views were except the prologue were basically from like main characters. That being said, it did feel not quite as tight as The Great Hunt. Also, Rand is my favorite character in the series, and even the thing is, we didn't have Rand perspectives, but the Rand stuff we got was really great. I didn't mention like his chapter where he kills like the 13 people, and one of them was like a gray man, and he gets them all to bow with the one power. Jeez, Rand, like calm down, bud. But I still it's kind of a middle of the pack Wheel of Time book, which means I really love it and think it's great. Basically my ranking of the books has stayed the same. When I first read it, The Great Hunt was my favorite of the first 3, then The Dragon Reborn, then Eye of the World. The separation between The Great Hunt and The Dragon Reborn has increased. I just didn't enjoy this as much as The Great Hunt. It was still very good. It had the Matt stuff, but it just really did have first half, second half. So in the first half of this book, we had Perrin had just left their camp. Matt had just left the White Tower. The Wonder Girls had just left the White Tower. So it took them half the book to leave, and then the other half to get to Tyr, meet Aiel, like meet Fael, learn that Samael is in charge of Ilion, conquer Tyr, kill 2 Forsaken, kill some Dark Hounds. Like, in terms of, like, the amount of content that happens, this book is very much backloaded, compared to The Great Hunt, which I think is more steady, except the back half of The Great Hunt is, like, it's not, I think it's just as good as the back half of this. It's just the front half I prefer. Still great world building stuff. I still love the way I feel like the individual locations, like Robert Jordan covers a lot of locations, and I feel like I can picture them as well as I do locations that like people spend entire books in. So I still very much enjoy this book. It gets an 8.8 out of 10 at a somewhat middle of the pack Wheel of Time books. And now, if you are not fully caught up on the series, I'm going to get you to click away because there's a couple things I want to talk about foreshadowing-wise that I can only really talk about with full stories. So, spoilers for A Memory of Light.
literally for like the big final, the climax of A Memory of Light. I'm gonna spoil stuff in there. Is everyone gone? Only people completely done the Wheel of Time here. So, fuck off, Shariam. Shariam's all on her high horse when the Grey Man shows up. You Black-Ajah piece of shit. You get off your high horse right now. Which I really enjoyed the White Tower section, knowing that Varen is Black-Ajah, but not really, and Shariam is fully Black-Ajah. And then, as I mentioned, like, god damn it, Elaine. Elaine has been looking for an excuse to charge into battle unarmored for 11 books. And she finally did it in A Memory of Light. But she was looking for an excuse to do it for 11 books. Why are you the way that you are? Those are the only two things I want to talk about. Also, I'm really like the Pot on Fane stuff for Patreon. I'm really looking forward to. I'm trying to remember. Does I forget his real name, but the man who calls himself Boars. He's in the Shadow Rising right now, which I'm reading, and he's not doing great. Does he show up in book 7? I think he's in Ebudar, right? Definitely hasn't killed Rand. I wonder if his family members are still being flayed. Huh. Does he die? I forget what happens to him. Whatever. I'll find out. Anyways, that's all I got.